Well, this morning, it's still morning, but earlier this morning, I heard a report in the alternative news media where I get a lot of information that I think is pretty good, and some of it's not good. This information is in the category of, if true, it's very important. I think you'll agree. The claim is that the election machines, the voting machines throughout our country have been compromised. Not necessarily every machine, but enough of them have been compromised with software or other means of intervening that have been applied to these machines such that the people who did it can control the results of our election in 2020. Sounds like a wild claim. It's coming from a guy who said he was part of making it happen. The guy who's making this claim himself is not known to be credible. The reason he's not credible might not be his fault. It might be that the reason he's not credible is that he's been smeared by people who don't want him to put his story out. Maybe the reason he's been smeared is he's a bad guy. Even if he's a bad guy, he still might be telling the truth. His story has been vetted by 2 former officers of the National Security Agency. Now, the National Security Agency of the United States is one of those parts of our government that has people in it that participate in what we call the deep state. Those are not patriots. Those are people who are not committed to our constitutional form of government. But these 2 guys who used to be in the NSA are patriots. They are committed to our constitutional form of government. At least I believe that. I hope you'll check this out and come to your own conclusions. These 2 NSA guys are on a radio show, and that radio show, for the most part, I find to be a very credible program, but there are some problems with some of its reporting. But those problems, in my opinion, are small compared to most of the work of that radio show. So that's the introduction to what this video is about. I've tried to keep this really short. This is sort of an emergency video. I just want to try to get the word out to people so that people can start looking into this and finding out whether it's true. We need to verify this. We need to rely. One of the places I'm going to share this is a place called Crowdsource the Truth, which you can find at Patreon. You can find it on YouTube. If you just search for it, you'll find Crowdsource the Truth. And I think it's not a perfect idea, but I think it's one of the better ideas that we have today, especially given the fact that our commercial news media in this country does not provide good information, provides a lot of bad information. So we have to somehow work together, and I think Crowdsource the Truth is got a good idea about how to do that. So I'm going to try to crowdsource this story. And if it's false, fine. If it's true, we've got to do something about it, because our election will be determined by the people who've meddled in these machines. So the first thing that you're going to see once I stop here is you're going to see a guy who I think is a very fine member of the United States intelligence community. I don't have all of his credentials in front of me. You can look them up yourself. His name is Tony Shaffer, and he is a model citizen, in my opinion, and you'll hear more about him in a minute. And the reason I put him at the beginning is that he has firsthand knowledge of how our machines can be compromised. He speaks of somebody he knows who did it, a professor, I think, at the University of Michigan, so I'm going to be trying to contact them. I'm sorry, but I have to cut in with a quick correction. I just said that Tony Shaffer has firsthand experience with penetrating voting machines. He may have that, although I don't know for sure that he does. He has secondhand information. He mentions that he knows of a professor who did it, but he has more than that. He is the head of an organization that is working on protecting the integrity of the elections in the United States. So he's, I don't know what his exact level of firsthand knowledge is, but I just wanted to give that clarification. Right. But Shaffer himself is a decent source. And then the rest of the video gets into what I heard. Well, it's a replay. I've edited it from a radio program. It's actually a podcast, and I want you to know I've edited it to pull out the sections that I think have the message in them that I'm trying to put across here. But with this, if you're finding this video, I hope you'll find with it the link I'm going to present with it. I imagine I'll put it right in the video that shows the sources, the places where I got this, and so you can hear these programs in their complete unredacted or unedited form, because I'm not trying to mislead with the editing I've done. I've just tried to highlight what I think is important. So I do think this is rather urgent. If it turns out I'm being bamboozled here and there's nothing to worry about, that'll be great. But if it is something to worry about, I don't think I need to explain it. I think I do need to explain it, but I'm going to explain that in another video. So with that, I'm going to sign off this part of the video, and we'll get on with the rest. This guy here is Tony Shaffer. He is a member of the United States government's intelligence community. He's had a variety of foot jobs where he's sort of been an agent on the ground, so to speak, and he's also become an executive. He also works outside the government. He's quite senior, and he is not deep state. This is a good guy. He's against the deep state. And here he's going to tell us about the fact that it's possible for voting machines used in the United States to be compromised by injection of software. It's done in various ways depending on the types of machine it is, but I just wanted to show you this part so that you just to give you a credible report of the fact that this is possible. And then after this, I have another report about the fact that it's actually it's a report that it's been done, and I want you to be able to evaluate it. So here comes Tony Shaffer.
About Russian interference. The implication has been there's been a real blurring of perception by the left regarding Russian interference. Russians somehow interfered with the vote count. Michigan and Wisconsin really, somehow they interfered with those few, and I don't believe any of that. But I do believe that certain threat organizations, intelligence agencies have determined that there's a digital vulnerability that exists within our system. In the early 2000s, after the hanging Chad, the Gore-Bush 43 election, there was all these recounts in Florida, and it had to do with hanging Chads, about this physical, people punch things, and did the Chad go through or not? That created a whole backlash against paper votes, and it was because of the punch system. So we all went at the time, and a lot of money was spent on this in the early 2000s to go to digital systems. Now, Janet, in those days, people did not understand the inherent vulnerabilities to digital systems, that if you have access to it, you can manipulate it. We've seen this, a certain country, China, has been accused of being able to do certain things with digitalization. They will manipulate things. So this coalition I work with has recognized that as a huge issue. Dr. Alex Haldeman is part of it. He teaches up in the University of Michigan. Alex has done penetrations of digital systems where he can literally hack into a system and change votes in real time.
Like one of these digital voting machines.
That exist, because these things were built with no security.
Wow.
They were built at a time when there was no perception of any external threat that could
And
change.
These are machines that are still being used today and might well be used at 2020.
The next voices you're going to hear are the voices of three men, and they're going to be talking about a fourth man. And you need to know that the credibility of these men as sources is mixed. One of the guys two of them are, I think, just about as credible as anybody could possibly be. And those two are Bill Binney and Kirk Weibe, who are former officers of the United States National Security Agency, where they both served our country in a very competent and straightforward manner. You're going to hear a little bit about that. They're on a radio program hosted by a fellow named Dave Janda, Dr. Dave Janda. He used to be an orthopedic surgeon. He gave up that practice to do his radio show, and for the most part, Dave Janda puts out terrific information. Unfortunately, his reporting on the subject that this video covers has been called into question, and I call it into question because part of his reporting relies on a reporter named Mary Fanning, whose reports appear to have false statements in them, and neither she nor Dave Janda are real open. In fact, they're both not open about discussing the problems with their story, but those problems are small compared to the overall picture. So now what they're talking about is a new claim that I have not heard before today, but it comes from a person through these NSA guys, who the person that it originates from, his credibility has very much been called into question, but his credibility is also strongly defended. So I'm not real sure. I haven't been able to get enough information to actually sort out the truth about this source. And his name is Dennis Montgomery. Dennis Montgomery used to be a contractor, a software programming contractor for the federal government in the NSA and in the CIA. Now, software programming happens to be my profession, and so if I knew more from Dennis Montgomery, I would be able to have an opinion about the veracity of what he's saying. Now, these NSA guys, I think, are also qualified to have an opinion, and they say that what Dennis Montgomery is saying, they believe. They've evaluated him as a source, and they consider him a credible source. And I think that these two NSA guys saying that Dennis Montgomery is a credible source is a report that cannot just be considered false out of hand. And the claim is that Dennis Montgomery knows about or played a part in infiltrating the voting machines throughout the United States to a degree that the 2020 election would be in control of the people that Dennis Montgomery did that for, and those would be people from the deep state. Those would be people we don't want controlling the election. We want the voters controlling the election the way it's designed to be controlled in our Constitution. The first voice you're going to hear when I stop is the voice of Dr. Dave Janda, who's hosting his radio show, and he's asking Bill Binney and Kirk Weibe, the two NSA guys, whether they've had a chance to actually speak to Dennis Montgomery directly. And they say that they've spoken to him recently. This recording was made at about October 20th, 2019. So that'll give you an idea of how recent it is. And here we go.
Have you had a chance to speak with Montgomery?
Yes, we had. Yeah.
Recently, correct?
We did last night, yes.
Last night. All right. And is that the first time you guys have spoken to Montgomery?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is, yeah.
Okay, what was your take?
Well, it was the typical technical guy. He used to do too much down in the weeds. Oh, I can do this, I can do that, I've got this, I've got that, and all that stuff. I said, well, that's understood once you do the bulk acquisition. You have all that stuff, but what's important in it is what we need to focus on, and that's why I tried to, you have to, technical people, you got to bring them back to focus, get focused on what's important. So that was what we were doing last night. And I think basically he's got a lot of things that need to be opened up and exposed in court.
Kirk, what was your take? Because, there are people out there that say Montgomery's a complete fraud. Montgomery is a guy who can't tie his shoelaces when it comes to IT stuff.
No. It's clear to me Dennis is the real deal. He needs help because he's sitting on a ton of information, Dave. Bill and I had our eyes open to just how pervasive the work that he did for Clapper and Brennan and whomever, the bad guys, as I call them. And if we don't get our act together quickly and help Dennis reverse the damage that he has put in place to be done to our national electoral system, our election system, this nation's in trouble looking at 2020. And I kid you not. This is a national emergency, I'm going to tell you right now, and deserves that kind of response.
So, Kirk, what needs to happen? Bill, what needs to happen?
I think we really need to fix these problems that they've created, and it is fixable. I mean, we can do that, but it's a matter of focusing on it and getting a priority to it, so that we can actually make it happen. That's the problem. That's the main problem that we're facing. Is we have no resolve to fix problems.
Here's the interesting dilemma, Dave. The federal government has absolutely no authority to govern our national elections. None. It's all, per the Constitution, given to the states, the various states. We have 50 of them. Yep. Almost all of them are derelict in maintaining the integrity of their election machines, their registration rolls, the whole process. This is a cesspool waiting to explode. Now, the states will say, well, we didn't know, we haven't budgeted for this in many cases, or they refuse to change their technology, some of which is 10 years old. Based on information Dennis gave us, there are implantations in voting machines that will not be detected by the normal means of scrubbing a system to ensure it is safe. You know, technology marches on, and there's a cat and mouse game between what the bad guys can do and what the good guys can do. The bad guys usually initially come out in front of that competition because the offensive is who implements the innovative approaches to subversion. The defense is always playing catch-up because it has to learn about them, figure out how they work, and then respond. And by that time, technology's already moved on. So we never, ever quite catch up with the bad guys.
Now, based on what the two of you have learned about the electoral system and the election system, let's go back to 2016. The bad guys had some of these mechanisms in place, and is this the reason why Hillary was out there claiming that she won the popular vote when in fact President Trump obviously won in a landslide when it came to the Electoral College? I mean, it was essentially a, quote, miracle that President Trump won, because if these systems are in place for the coming 2020 election, obviously we're in place for the 2018 midterms, which would explain a lot of why all of a sudden, you know, certain Republicans in certain key districts were winning and had won as of election night, and then all of a sudden, what happened here? All of a sudden, the election results were being turned over left and right in a number of districts. It was obviously also in place in 2016. Was it just there was an overwhelming win for President Trump, and it was so overwhelming that it overwhelmed the built-in biases within the system that were there? Or the bugs in the system?
Yeah, I believe that's the case. They didn't plan on enough of a threshold to win, for sure. That's in the software.
Yeah, I believe the same thing. I believe 2016 was a bit of experimentation by the guys on the bad side to see if they could test concepts and ways of cheating that would go undetected. And then the intent was to do an even more widespread implementation of that in 2018 midterm, and then really, though, all pointing to the biggie in 2020 when they can take the White House back. So the stakes are high. This is critical. But I also point out the fact, You know, we have the Electoral College, and there's an argument about whether we should have it.